We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Yo guys! I'm Yuruzi. I'm back today with a new series. This is what if Naruto was sent to the world of Inuyasha. Naruto has lost everything in the final battle. He is asked to aid a group in their journey. But will his own grief and pain get in the way? Or will this new group heal his broken soul? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 1, Midorico. A lone figure stood atop the scarred mountain face that once housed the Hokage monument. He stared at the sea of flames and destruction that was once the village of the Hidden Leaves. Now a scared battleground, filled with bodies, ash, rubble and death, that mocked its former prime. Was this it? Was this the result of all that they had worked for? He had tried, oh had he tried. But still, it wasn't enough. He couldn't protect them. All gone. Orochimaru, in a last-ditch of effort to win the war, launched a desperate surprise attack on the village. But the Leaf Nians organized too quickly, and despite being caught unawares and Orochimaru having possessed Sasuke, they were soon being pushed back. In the end, Naruto, Sakura, Kakashi, Jiraiya and Tsunade had the snake cornered. That's when everything went straight to hell. Akatsuki's entire organization arrived and began attacking. Mato Gaiapined all 8 gates, succeeding in killing Kisame and weakening 2 others. Tenten, Niji and Rock Lee took on one of the weakened members whose name was Kakuzu. Yet when they were ready to kill the man, he used a suicidal technique, taking down himself and everyone else with him. Haiden, the immortal, had taken down Shikamaru, Ino, Chuji and Azuma before Kakashi was able to deliver a Chidori right into the man's head. Just before he was burnt to ash by Itachi's Amaterasu, Kurenai had fought against Tobi, using genjutsu after genjutsu against each other. The two were soon exhausted, and even as Shino was able to deal with the man, Kurenai soon died from chakra depletion herself. Hinata and Kiba fought against a blue-haired Kunoichi, and despite their best efforts they soon fell to her. Shino, in a blind rage, attacked the Kunoichi but was cut down as well. In the end, only Naruto, Sakura, Jiraiya and Tsunade stood against the remaining 5 S-class criminals. Then Suna arrived with the flicker of hope lighting again. Naruto, now 17, a member of the Umbu Ad, one of the strongest ninja in the village, if not the strongest, faced the leader of the organization along with his pink-haired teammate. Tsunade fought against the blue-haired Kunoichi with everything she had, but the woman's speed and reaction time was far above her own, and only her experience and monstrous strength kept her in the fight. Gaara fought against Deidara and was able to kill the clay wielder, but not before receiving some serious injuries, which he succumbed to as he moved to try and assist Naruto and Sakura against the leader. Temari and Kankuro fought against Zetsu, the mysterious ninja from Kusa, and managed to defeat the man. But Zetsu managed to inject them with a fast-acting poison and they soon fell to it. Jiraiya fought against Itachi, but the young Uchiha was far beyond the Toad Hermit's level in regards of speed and chakra capacity. The Toad Hermit fought valiantly, but he too fell to the power of the Mangekyo. As Naruto fought with all the strength he possessed to try and defeat the leader of the organization, Sakura fought with just as much vigor. But one simple mistake and the elder ninja exploited it. As Naruto waited for his death, he was surprised to see a flash of pink and warm blood splashed on his face. He opened his eyes and saw Sakura's gentle green ones. She smiled a smile full of warmth and acceptance. He stood there in shock, and as the leader pulled his blade out, she fell forward. Naruto caught her and felt the prickling of tears behind his eyes. He asked just one simple question. Why? But she did not answer. She merely smiled and took one last breath before closing her eyes and gave a final whisper. Live! Naruto cried, and as his eyes turned red he slowly looked up and found the leader, Itachi and the blue-haired Kunoichi, standing before him. He entered his mind and walked up to the cage. The giant Kitsune looked at the blonde and felt his eyes go wide as the blonde placed a hand above the seal, and in a flash, the paper seal was torn off and the bars dissolved into nothingness. The Kyuubi looked at the boy, but the blonde only said one thing. Go wild. With a fanged smirk and an unearthly roar, the Kyuubi no Kitsune was free. Naruto awoke hours later. Somehow he was still alive, but the rest of the village was destroyed. He should assume it was the Kyuubi, but somehow, he knew the fox did not do this. If he did, then it was fighting the remainder of the Akatsuki, not the fox itself. He didn't know how he knew that, he just did. So now, here he stood above the monument staring at what had once been his village. He had taken some clothes from the destroyed shops and shinobi gear stores. He now wore a standard Umbu full-body armor with black face mask, reminiscent of Kakashi, fingerless gloves, like Sakura's, a customized forehead protector that had flame designs on the edges. It reminded him of Jiraiya, since he too had a customized forehead protector. The cloth was very long and thick, making it flail behind him in the wind. It reminded him of Konohamaru's scarf. And last but not least, he had the necklace he had won from Tsunade so many years ago. He sighed. Why was he still here? Perhaps he should step off and end it himself. Live. Sakura's last word echoed in his mind, making him heave another sigh. He turned on his heel to walk away but stopped as he saw a glowing pearl or jewel. He looked around as he tried to find whoever dropped it here for him to find. Even so, it was strange, few could sneak up on him. As a matter of fact, with Akatsuki defeated, and the 3 Sannin dead, he could safely say that no one short of a Kage of another village could sneak up on him. In his 17 years, Jiraiya and Tsunade said that he may have very well surpassed the professor himself while he was still in his prime. Or as Naruto liked to call him, Gigi. He shrugged and walked forward, and in a flash of pink light both he and the jewel vanished. Naruto opened his eyes and entered the world of the living with a feeling of weightlessness about him. He looked around to a plethora of swirling lights all around him. Well, this is interesting, he muttered in a slightly bored tone of voice. At once the images shifted, revealing a woman with samurai-style shoulder and chest armor with Miko clothing underneath. She was battling a horde of what Naruto assumed to be yokai. The Miko fought for 7 days and 7 nights before finally, with one final cry and a bright flash, both the Miko and the yokai were forever turned to stone and the jewel burst from the Miko's chest. The images faded and formed into view again. A red-clad young man with dog ears was rushing through the trees with the jewel in his hand. Ha, finally a way for me to become a full demon at last, he said with triumph, making Naruto raise an eyebrow in silent questioning. Die Inuyasha, came the voice of a female before an arrow whizzed by his head and lodged itself in Inuyasha's shoulder. Naruto turned around and laid eyes on the woman in priestess robes. She had a rather large gash on her right shoulder that was bleeding horribly. Most likely fatal. Kikikyo. The boy, Inuyasha gasped out before his head fell limp to the side. The images warped and faded again. This time a girl wearing a short green skirt was being crushed by what appeared to be a giant centipede against the tree Inuyasha was pinned to. She resembled the other one, Kikyo, he absently noted. With a cry she grasped onto the arrow and the wooden projectile dissolved. Inuyasha awoke and with a few quick words he sliced the centipede to bits and lunged at the young girl. When they finally got the subjugation beads on him, Naruto had to laugh at the sight of the mighty half-demon plowing face first into the ground. He silently observed their adventures with a sparkle of amusement in his eyes. He watched as the woman, Kikyo, was brought back, which was followed shortly by the appearance of Inuyasha's full demon brother Sesomaru and his search for the Tetsusaiga. It kinda reminded him of Itachi. Then he watched as they met up with the fox Kitling, followed shortly by the monk and then the demon slayer, Sango. He had to admit, this Nariku was a smart bastard. Sick, twisted and completely insane, but a smart bastard nonetheless. The final scene was of Nariku's final form as the Inu gang stood within Hakurei. It reminded him of Orochimaru, Sasuke, and Kimimaro all in one. As the final scene faded he blinked lazily. Well, I suppose my next question should be, who are you? But we already know the answer to that, don't we, Midorico? Naruto said as he turned around. The legendary priestess formed into view in front of him, smiling kindly at the young shinobi. Naruto smiled back, his eyes going into upside-down use similar to his old sensei's. Not that the tale wasn't good, but why exactly am I here? Naruto, I assume, she stated with a nod and a kind smile. Naruto raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms in front of him and leaned forward, slightly. I believe it is safe to assume that while I have been here looking at this, you have been doing something similar to my memories, eh? Midoriko's smile grew. Sharp, aren't you? I've picked up a few things, Naruto admitted with his eyes going into upside-down use. But you still have not answered my question, he said as he wagged his finger playfully. Midoriko's smile was slightly apologetic. You're right, of course, she admitted. I suppose I should just cut right to the chase. It would be nice, he admitted with his cheerful demeanor. I want your help, she confessed. Naruto said curiously. I assume it would be to help these four stop Naruto, correct? She nodded. I fear for them and for humanity. The only way for the jewel to be purified permanently would be for a pure wish, done by one with a pure heart to make the wish upon the jewel. The first priestess, Kikyo. Her spirit is clouded by hate and anger. She can no longer purify the jewel unless she lets go of those two emotions, and Kagome, though pure of heart, is untrained and her spirit possesses much sadness because of the Hanyo's love for Kikyo. She said as she placed a hand over her chest. My soul is tired, and if one of them make a wish born out of selfishness, then I am uncertain if I will be able to continue fighting the yokai sealed within the jewel. Well, you certainly pick a strange savior. My heart and soul also hold much hate and sadness. Or has my ever-present mask even fooled one as wise as yourself who has also visited my memories? He said with his eyes still smiling. Or perhaps my sanity has confused the emotions that I feel. He pondered aloud. Midorico's eyes showed sadness for the young boy, and she slowly walked forward and enveloped him in a warm, comforting embrace. Naruto stiffened slightly at the unfamiliar contact. He half expected her to pull out a knife and stab him in the back. Something that he found a small part of him was hoping for. Your heart and soul have been dealt great and terrible wounds. You no longer wish to live, do you? Naruto smiled down at the woman with sadness visible even behind his face mask. What does one such as I have left to live for, Midorico? Midorico looked down with guilt and sadness weighing at her. I know it is wrong to ask this of you, but I know you can help them. You, who have suffered so much, yet endured so much better than anyone else should they have taken your place. You can show them how to overcome their hardships. Please. The last part was whispered in an almost begging tone. Naruto remained silent for a few moments before finally speaking. Very well. Midorico pulled away and smiled up at the blonde with a slightly teary, but nonetheless grateful gaze. Thank you, she whispered sincerely before Naruto was enveloped in a pink light and soon faded from the realm of the Shuriken. Chapter 2. Do you meet everyone like this? Naruto slowly opened his eyes and found himself beneath a tree with a clear sky above him. He would have to guess it was morning if the singing birds and misty air was any indication. Now where have you placed me, Midorico? He mused to himself. His eyes slowly rolled upwards and came to the site of the ancient Gashimboku. The tree where Kikyo sealed Inuyasha. Fitting, I suppose. He thought to himself before slowly picking himself off the ground. Now if the visions I saw were accurate, then I suppose the village should be that away. He said with a mild shrug before walking in the direction he pointed out earlier. As he approached the village, he saw the wet fields and crops forming along the hills and slopes. It was just like the jewel had shown him. So that small hut in the center of the village should be where the old priestess, Kid, lived. With a shrug he began making his way there. As he passed by, the villagers sent him glances filled with trepidation and even a little fear. Still, he couldn't really blame them much. It probably wasn't often they saw a masked figure in full Umbu armor walking down the road, so it was no surprise when Kid and several of the village men were soon gathered in front of the very hut that he went to visit. Well now, is this the welcoming party? He asked, his voice a lazy drawl. Kid stepped forward to speak. What do you seek here? She asked, narrowing her single eye at the ninja. Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment. I suppose you could call it information. We are a simple village. We have no information for a ninja. Kid replied. Oh, but you do. Naruto stated as he shook his finger with his eyes as upside down use once again. About a certain Hanayo, Hosui, Tajiya and untrained Miko. Kid's eyes widened and, with speed no woman her age should possess, her bow was in her hands and already pulling back an arrow. As the string was released, the projectile flew through the air, heading straight for Naruto's neck. In a simple side step the boy let the arrow whiz by. Now was that really necessary? He chided with the smile still present. Kid narrowed her eyes at the blonde. I will not allow you to harm them, assassin. She said with forceful determination, and Naruto had to admit that even in her old age the woman was indeed someone one did not want to mess with, but nevertheless he decided to play this out. Now, if they sent me to deal with a Hanyu with a powerful sword and an experienced demon slayer, a monk with a black void in his hand and a Miko with untrained spiritual powers, then I doubt a few villagers and an old woman can handle me. He craned his head to the side to avoid another arrow. Young man, Kid spoke as she notched another arrow. You do not wish to threaten me. Sha aimed the bow. That is a very foolish thing to do. I may not be as powerful as my sister, but I am indeed more than a match for a common ninja. He smirked in a very intimidating way. And one could see that even beneath the mask. Who says I'm common? She fired. The arrow whizzed through the air and lodged itself in his chest, and he promptly vanished in a nice cloud of smoke. Keed's eyes widened, and before she or any of the villagers could react, she felt the cold edge of a kunai on her neck. Now, are you ready to start sharing? Came the blonde's voice from directly behind her. Naruto still held his smile even as he felt the village men all moving and pointing their spears at his neck and chest. Keed gulped and she felt a bead of sweat trail down her cheek. Well, Baba. Where are they? Keed refused to speak and stayed quiet. Naruto had to admire her dedication to the group. A villager spoke to his right. They left the village. Masanori! Keed yelled in warning. The man, Masanori, bowed lowly to the old Miko. Forgive me, Lady Keed, but you have always been like a grandmother to me. I will not allow you to die if I should have a way to prevent it. Naruto eyed the man with a lazy, yet critical eye. Well, they left, heading eastward. Thank you. Naruto said, and with a quick wave he vanished in a swirl of leaves, leaving a startled group of villagers and a worried Miko. The Inu gang was currently sitting around a fire in subdued silence. Inuyasha had taken the death of Kikyo rather hard. He hadn't spoken a word to anyone for 2 whole days. Even when Kagome offered him ramen, he would still say nothing. Each of the group had somewhat mixed feelings on the situation, but none dared to speak up. Naruto watched the group through Kanna's mirror with a sick smirk plastered on his face. Already a sick plot formed within his mind. He could increase the Hanyo's suffering by taking away his second love. But merely kidnapping her just wouldn't do. No, he wanted Inuyasha to watch as Kagome was taken away, permanently. While he was helpless to stop it. Kagura! His cold voice seemed to sweep across the hallways, like a blanket of cold, dark miasma. Immediately the Wind Mistress appeared before him. Listen closely. As Naruto's trek across the lands of feudal Japan continued, he avoided most of the villages he came across. Often he preferred to simply hunt for his food and maintain an extremely low profile. If the title Sesomaru held, Teokai of the West, was any indication, it was safe to assume that there were at least 3 others. And Sesomaru was most certainly someone he would not want to fight one-on-one. He wasn't sure if he could defeat the Teokai. Every other time Inuyasha had come out victorious had been through sheer dumb luck or twist of fate. It was safe to assume that if Inuyasha had not found out the way to use the wind scar on their 3rd or 5th confrontation, then the Hanyu would most likely be dead. So if the other Teokai were as strong as him, he did not wish to catch their attention, and a ninja walking around in a time of mainly samurai might just raise a few eyebrows. It was highly unlikely, but it was still a risk he did not wish to take. So it was no surprise that he currently found himself sitting amidst the dying flames of a campfire where he had cooked 2 rabbits. Now they laid as a pile of bones and near him. He silently removed any traces left of his camp. It was a skill that Jiraiya taught him long ago, while he had trained. The Toad Hermit had always said, your enemies will always fear you more, if they do not even know you exist. With a small shake of his head he removed the thoughts of his old mentor from his mind. He didn't want to think about him. He didn't want to think of any of them. Not now, not ever again. He sighed tiredly before finishing the process and leaving an empty field. Inuyasha stopped mid-stride as his ears perked up and he sniffed the air. With a snarl he unsheathed the Tetsusaiga and the Fang emerged. Inuyasha, what's wrong? Came Miroku's voice as he and the others dismounted Kirara. Kagura! Was the half-demon's only response as the familiar feather in the sky began descending with hundreds of demons hot on its trail. Naruto slowly looked up to the sky as hundreds of low-level snake and worm yokai soared through the air, following what appeared to be a giant feather. He stared at it for a few moments. Well, that's not good. He muttered absently to himself before resuming his walk. Wind scar! Was the cry that echoed across the battlefield as the half-demon swung his blade into the horde of incoming demons. Miroku had managed to use his wind tunnel on some, but predictably enough Naruto's insects soon arrived and left the Hosui with his sutras and staff as his only weapons. Sango was swinging the large boomerang, Hirekatsu like a woman possessed. With Kirara biting and slashing at any demons that came near her while the weapon was still flying. Kagome hung back towards the rear of the group, shooting her purification arrows with enough power to purify 2 or 3 of them with a single shot. Shippo stood at her heels, using his fox fire on the few that he could. Kagura sat atop her feather, while secretly hoping that the group would win. She hated Naruto. The sick bastard was twisted and cruel and she wanted out. Since Sesomaru had refused the use of the jewel shard, she had offered him one of the few groups of people that even had a slight chance of defeating the dark half-demon was this group right here. With a slight buzzing sound coming from her right, she turned her head and found one of Naruto's famous insects watching her. So he was spying on her again. She cursed under her breath and took out her fan. Naruto sat in a tree, silently observing the fight, watching each of them. The Inu group was nothing new, he had seen most of their battles in the visions. But the woman, Naruto's incarnation, Kagura. It appeared as if she was not going to join the fight. He saw, with his sharpened vision, as a bug hovered next to her and she took out her fan. Either that's a signal for attack, or Naruto is spying on her. Do I sense animosity? He watched as she stood and prepared to swing her fan to use the Dance of Blades attack. Now, the only question was, who are you aiming for? It was soon answered. Kagome, watch out! Came Shippo's voice at Kagome's feet. As the young high school girl looked up to where the fox was pointing, she barely had the reflexes to move away just in time before Kagura's blades tore her in half. Even so, the wind sorceress managed to get a hit that sliced deep into her left thigh. She cried out as she fell to the ground, her arrows clattering and falling out of their quiver. Her bow lay sliced in two at her side. She was now defenseless. As Inuyasha heard Shippo, the blast sound and Kagome's own scream, as well as the smell of her blood, had the half-demon turning around completely to where he knew the girl was. Kagome! He screamed as he watched Kagura prepare another dance of blades. He moved to charge at either the girl or the sorceress, but in a rush, the hundreds of snake yokai that he had forgotten in his haste swarmed over and around him, barring his path and packing themselves in way to close for him to us the wind scar effectively. Damn it! He growled in frustration as he swung his sword again. Kagura winced in her mind and also gave a slight grimace. It appeared as though Naruto's plan would work for once. Inuyasha was busy and the monk and slayer were too far to do anything. I'm sorry, she mentally apologized before swinging her fan again, letting her wind blades fly. Kagome watched the attack coming at her with fear and realization creeping into her system. Mom, Suda, Grandpa. I'm sorry. But as she closed her eyes, the feeling of nausea and vertigo hit her full force and she felt her world spinning out of control. When her mind and her eyes finally came into focus again, she was staring at the masked visage of a blond man with blue eyes that appeared to be smiling. Do you meet all of your friends like this? Naruto asked with his eyes as upside down U's. Chapter 3, First Meetings Don't Always Go Well. Kagome stared at the blue eyes that appeared to be smiling at her. She opened her mouth to speak, but as soon as she did, a wave of nausea hit her like a ton of bricks and she lurched forward, emptying her stomach contents on the forest floor along with Shippo. Ah, Kawarimi. She faintly heard the masked man speak. Don't feel too bad, it happens to all of us the first few times. He said and began to rub circles along her back to help calm her down. Kagura whipped her head to the side as she heard them and felt her eyes go wide with shock as she stared at Kagome more than 20 yards away from where she had been. What the dash? There's no way a human can move that fast. She turned her head back to where her blades hit but only found the remains of a broken log. Whatever it was, I bet he can't do it again. She opened her fan again and with a cry her wind blades flew with even more power than before. Naruto stopped rubbing Kagome's back as he sensed the attack. He turned around and saw the blades coming at him. As they approached, he raised his hand in the air and spoke. Daikamitachi no Jutsu. A gust of wind picked up from nowhere and blades formed within the wind. Temari had taught him this. Over the years she had become something of a sister figure to the blonde leaf Nin, and when he told her that he was of the wind element, she had begun to teach him some of her ninjutsu. Either because of his training, or because of the fox within him, he had mastered her jutsu to such an extent he did not even need the fan she always used. He chuckled slightly as he remembered her face the first time he had done that without the fan. Her jaw had reached below sea level and she had been slightly put out by it. The fact that she, a woman who had spent decades dedicating herself to her wind-based techniques, had been surpassed by someone who had barely studied it for a year. Of course he had used shadow clones. But she didn't know that, really pissed her off. But soon his mind fell back into a somber state. Those days were gone now, and no matter how much he wanted it differently, it would never happen again. With a sigh he looked back to the battle. Kagura's blades met Naruto's and soon both attacks cancelled each other out. Kagura stared with wide eyes at what had just happened. But as the dust from the two attacks settled, the blonde was nowhere to be seen. Where did he dash? Her thoughts were cut off as said blonde appeared directly in front of her with a ball of swirling energy in his hand. Kagura could practically feel the raw power that his attack possessed, and she knew that she would never survive it. But, at the very least, Naruto would not be the one to kill her. She closed her eyes and resigned herself to her fate. As Naruto watched the emotions flicker across the wind demon's face, from shock to realization to satisfaction and finally to resignation, he knew that she did not do this by her own free will. Still, it was foolish to allow her to live. He really didn't think she was just gonna have a change of heart anytime soon, so leaving her alive was far too risky. Sorry, lady. But as the Rasengan neared her chest, a snake demon that he had missed came in and with a vicious bite to his forearm managed to divert his attack, hitting Kagura's feather and sending him straight down to earth. Naruto cursed, pulled out a kunai and stabbed the snake demon right between the eyes. Immediately the snake's grip slackened and Naruto was able to release himself from its grip. He flipped in mid-air and landed on his feet. He straightened and looked at the injury on his arm. It was already healing. Kyubi may have left, but his body already had the knowledge of how to mold the chakra to heal his injuries subconsciously. He shrugged. At least the fox had left him something of decent value. He looked back up to Kagura's slightly damaged feather and threw a shuriken. Kagura looked at him like he was crazy. One shuriken? It was insulting. Naruto smirked as he saw her expression. Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He whispered, and in seconds, one shuriken became 100 and Kagura was once again caught by surprise. She moved to swing her fan, but before she could, the shuriken were already there, biting into flesh, piercing skin, slicing tendons. Her fan was cut to ribbons and her clothes, normally immaculate and very elegant, were now no more than tattered rags. Kagura gasped in pain as the shuriken hit her. She tried to move, but everything hurt badly. She let out a strangled groan and coughed up blood. Damn it, she mentally cursed. Naruto would probably torture her for hours on end because of this failure. Still, this just meant that the group would live to fight another day and might very well defeat Naruto if they survived long enough. She spared a glance at the masked man standing below her with a casual laziness about him. She narrowed her eyes. Maybe even he would prove useful against Naruto. With that thought, the wind sorceress commanded her fan and rose into the skies. Naruto watched the demoness leave with an inquisitive glance before turning around in time to see the red of the Inu group finish off what remained of the yokai and rushing to Kagome and Sippu's side. Well, now things are going to get interesting, he thought with a mild shrug. Naruto watched from Kanna's mirror as Kagura was forced to retreat by the strange masked human that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He narrowed his eyes at the image of the young blonde. He seemed vaguely familiar for some reason that he could not explain. If there was one thing that Naruto hated, it was not knowing something, especially if that something might be a threat, and this blonde was definitely a threat. Few demons, let alone humans, could handle Kagura as easily as he did. It was as if he was always in complete control of the situation. Before he could ponder any more on what the blonde boy was, or why he was so powerful, Naruto turned and tossed another shuriken at the bug that Kanna was using to project the image with. Naruto snarled and stood from his position. He needed some stress relief. Maybe giving Kagura a fitting punishment for her failure would help him cool off. As one, the Inu group huddled around Kagome and Shippo, letting out questions of "Are you alright?" and "What happened?" all at once. Kagome took deep breaths as the nausea finally passed and her stomach settled down. When she was finally able to move again, she took Shippo, who still hadn't recovered yet from the after effects of the Kawarimi, into her arms. "I'm fine," she croaked out, but then, winced in pain as her bleeding thigh came back to the forefront of her mind. When her mind finally caught up with her, she looked around for the masked man that had saved her. But she couldn't find him anywhere. "You know, if you don't bandage that up, you're gonna bleed to death," came a voice right next to her ear, making her, and everybody else, jump up 20 feet and look at the person who spoke. And there stood the masked visage of Uzumaki Naruto, grinning like a complete idiot behind his face mask. His eyes were the exact same upside-down U's that Kakashi had. It was kinda creepy actually. Immediately, Inuyasha stood in front of Kagome, with his sword in a ready stance, and even though Miroku and Sango refrained from showing open hostility, like Inuyasha did, one could tell, by the slight tensing of their muscles, that they were ready to fight at a moment's notice. "Who are you and what do you want?" came Inuyasha's voice with hostility. Naruto leaned forward. Well, I suppose I am a ninja. And I have been hired to do a certain job. Everyone tensed. Ninjas were assassins, and if he was here, that meant that they were most likely his targets. And what job would that be? Miroku asked as he began removing the beads from his hand. Naruto eyed the monk's hand warily. He did take the time to choose his next words carefully. Let's just say, a mutual friend sent me to help you. Everyone stopped for a moment, each thinking about what he had said. After several seconds, Inuyasha decided to be the voice of the group. Ha! Naruto refrained from making fun of the Hanyu. Like I said, I'm here to help you. Why? This time it was Kagome's voice. How do you even know about the jewel? Miroku. Who's this friend of yours? Sango. My tummy hurts. Shippo. Faye, last thing we need is another human joining us. Predictably, Inuyasha. Naruto simply held up a hand to silence them all. As much as I'd love to answer your questions, I want. Then I am afraid you cannot come with us. Came Miroku's solemn voice. Naruto sighed. I thought you'd say that, he muttered before perking up again. That's why I got these. He lifted his fist and opened it, revealing my jewel shards. Kagome gasped. Naruto smiled happily before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Chapter 4, What did I get myself into? Iron Reaver Soul Stealer. Naruto rolled to the side as he avoided Inuyasha's attack. He did a quick backflip, catching the Hanyu with a kick to his chin. Inuyasha growled in anger and lunged at the ninja again. The group had been tracking him down since he had taken their shards. Of course, he had left them a clear trail. He had been searching for the best place to engage them. But it appeared that when Inuyasha had sensed him having stopped moving, he forced the group into an all-night march. So they had caught up. But now the majority were dead tired and no match for him, and even though Inuyasha refused to show it, even his movements were more sluggish and clumsier than normal, and that was saying something. Naruto sighed. Inuyasha was strong, but he could be so much stronger if he actually fought like a fighter instead of a brawler. With a sidestep, Inuyasha's claws barely grazed his cheek, and with a chakra-enforced punch right into the red-clad half-demon's gut, the Hanyu doubled over in a coughing fit. Naruto couldn't blame him. He had packed enough chakra in that fist to make over 100 shadow clones. Next time, don't leave yourself so wide open. First shinobi technique, taijutsu. He said in a similar tone to that of his old senseis when he did something wrong. Inuyasha, the monk. Naruto turned around and saw Miroku as he threw several of his sutra at Naruto. The young Umbu leapt into the air and back-flipped to land safely in a tree branch. Hirekatsu. Naruto's head snapped around in the direction he had heard the voice. What? He barely registered the sight of Sango's massive boomerang before it plowed straight through the tree he had claimed as his perch. He grunted in slight pain as he hit the ground. Luckily, he was able to roll with it and got to his feet much quicker than what most would have been able to do were they in his position. A shift in the air caught his attention, and he caught an arrow that would have hit him in the thigh, between his thumb and index finger. He looked at the point and then turned to the girl who fired it. You could have hit me, he mocked. Kagome's sweat dropped, but then her temper flared. Was he insulting her? That jerk! She mentally yelled before notching another arrow. This one glowed with Miko energy. Oh, shit! Naruto mentally yelped before sprinting away to avoid the demented one's arrows. As he finally escaped Kagome's firing range, the blonde could breathe again. Geez, if he didn't know any better, he'd say they were trying to kill him. Ha! Came Sango's voice as she slammed her Hirekatsu down in an attempt to cleave him in two from head to toe. The blonde side-stepped, and as Sango's boomerang slammed into the earth, he swiftly placed his foot down on top of it, stopping her from lifting it up again. Sango didn't even blink before she took out the sword she always kept as a backup and swiped at the blonde. As if it was done by magic, a kunai was in Naruto's hands, and he blocked the young demon slayer's blade with his own. With his free hand, he took out another kunai and moved to slice at her. Sango, by reflex, let go of her Hirekatsu and grabbed his wrist. Naruto smirked, and with some quick footwork, Hirekatsu flew high into the air. Sango now saw his plan. He wanted to separate her from her weapon of choice. Naruto saw Inuyasha approaching behind him from the reflection of Sango's blade and mentally cursed. He let go of the kunai that was in the hand Sango had grabbed and grabbed her wrist this time. Sango's eyes went wide with shock before the blonde gave her wrist a violent twist, making her scream out in pain. Her grip on her sword slackened for a brief moment and Naruto seized it. Before Sango knew what was happening, her sword was out of her grasp and she was facing Inuyasha, who had stopped mid-attack. Naruto kicked her towards the Hanyu and leapt back to a safe distance. He was about to make his escape when, wind tunnel! Miroku yelled. His intention was not to suck the blonde in, since that would take the jewel shards as well, but to merely stall him long enough for the whole group to get there. Naruto cursed as the howling winds drew him towards the black void. If it wasn't for using chakra to stick to the ground, he would have been sucked in already. Alright, think Uzumaki. How do you get yourself out of this one? He thought for a few moments before something hit him. Of course. With a discreet hand seal he made a shadow clone. Miroku watched the ninja struggle to keep himself from being sucked in. As a matter of fact, just how was he keeping himself in place anyway? He wasn't even holding onto a branch or anything. Before he could ponder on this anymore, he watched as the blonde threw a chain into the bushes and pulled the chain back, in which emerged Shippo. Miroku's eyes went wide for a brief moment before he quickly wrapped his cursed hand with the prayer beads again. But his shock turned to confusion as Shippo vanished in a puff of smoke. Second shinobi technique, Genjutsu. Naruto smirked, but it died as soon as he saw that he was surrounded. Miroku in front of him, Inuyasha behind him, Sango to his left and Kagome to his right. He looked up. Nope, Kirara had that covered too. Kagome then. Fox fire! Came Shippu's cry as the area in front of Kagome was covered in blue flames. It appeared as if the little fox knew where his train of thought was heading. Oh well now, this is a predicament, isn't it? He asked with his usual laziness. Inuyasha growled. Hurry up and give us back the jewel shards and maybe I won't kill you. Naruto lazily took out the small glass jar from his pocket. You mean these? He asked as he lazily rolled them between his thumb and index finger. He saw the whole group tense and he smiled. Nah, I think I'll keep them. He said happily. Inuyasha snorted. Have it your way. He said before unsheathing Tetsusaiga and running for the blonde. Naruto's eyes glinted with mischievousness. A glint that was not lost on Miroku. Inuyasha, stop. He tried to call out, but it was far too late. Before Inuyasha could react, he felt two hands wrap around his ankles and in a flash he was neck deep in dirt. Naruto sprouted from the ground in front of him with his eyes as upside-down U's that practically danced with amusement. Third shinobi technique, ninjutsu. He then felt the cold edge of Sango's sword on his neck. She had managed to seize the opportunity, while Miroku, Kagome, Shippu and Scratch that Kirara was breathing down his neck. But still the other three were gawking at him. Give us the shards and release Inuyasha now, assassin. Her voice was as cold as the steel on his neck. But still. He wasn't going to give them the illusion of victory. They had been getting by through the skin of their teeth. They had to learn, especially Inuyasha, that they were not invincible or they would find out the hard way. Already, if it wasn't for Sesomaru's timely arrival against the mercenary that used poisons most, if not all of the group would never have made it past the adventure. So yes. This was one battle. They were not going to win. With movement none of the Inu group believed any human capable of Naruto had managed to twist around in Sango's hold with only a tiny cut on his neck to show for it and managed to grab her sword arm and twist it behind her back. Sango! Miroku moved forward, but with a few one-handed seals he, Kagome, Shippu and Kirara were surrounded by shadow clones that were pointing some very sharp objects at their necks. It looks like you guys lose. Naruto said in a bored tone. The Inu group all gulped and came to the realization that indeed they had lost. Then in an instant, the shadow clones vanished and Sango was released. Naruto smiled and tossed Kagome the bottle of shards. Here you go. Kagome fumbled as she caught the bottle and stared at the blonde ninja with wide disbelieving eyes. Boo, but why? Naruto leveled her with a blank stare. You can't figure it out? Kagome and the rest of the group, including Inuyasha, who was still buried, stared confusedly at the young ninja. Naruto sighed. It was all a test. A way for me to test you. Inuyasha blinked stupidly. Test us? For what? Naruto turned to the entombed Hanyu with a lazy eye. Your abilities, and I must say they are quite lacking. You have potential, but it is all mostly untapped. What the hell do you mean lacking? I'll show you lacking, you little blonde-haired bastard, was Inuyasha's reply as he started grunting and trying to escape his earthly imprisonment. Naruto sighed and turned to the others. Like I said before, I was sent by a mutual friend to help you. And I'm going to do it even if I have to beat all of you on a daily basis to do it. Everyone exchanged glances. Was he serious? Miroku chose to step up first. Excuse me, but how exactly will you be helping us? Naruto shrugged. Traveling with you, hunting shards, fighting Naruto, the usual. Who knows, give it time and I might even teach you guys a thing or two. Faye, like anything you can do is better than what I could do, was Inuyasha's reply as he continued to struggle. Naruto turned to him with a lazy eye roll. I'm not the one who's buried up to my neck, am I? Inuyasha had the decency to blush before he growled and began spouting off curses. Naruto and the rest of the group shook their heads before Naruto decided to start his mission. Now then, can anyone tell me why I was able to defeat you? No one spoke until Shippo shyly raised his hand. Naruto turned to the kitsune with a smile. Yes, because you were stronger than all of us, he said, looking at the ninja with wide innocent eyes. Naruto's smile grew. Sorry, wrong, but thanks for the vote of confidence. No, the real reason I lost was because none of you truly know teamwork. What do you mean? Kagome began. We've all worked together for a long time now. Naruto nodded. True, you've all worked together but you don't know teamwork. I'm stronger than you individually, but if the guy with dog ears and the demon slayer would have pulled a double team along with you, Kagome giving long-range support, I don't think even I would have survived without the use of jutsu, but instead you all attacked me in a disorganized rabble. If you all learn how to work together, truly work together, then even 10 Narukus with no teamwork won't stand a chance against you. Everyone, but Inuyasha, who was still busy trying to get free, seemed to be considering this. Naruto decided to continue. Another reason you all lost is that I imagine one-man army over here. He pointed to Inuyasha. Made you run all night in an effort to catch up to me, any? They all gave a reluctant nod. Naruto smiled even wider. I thought so, all of your moves were sluggish and slightly off target. In your desperation to catch up with me, you left yourself vulnerable and would have been dead right now if I truly was an assassin. Inuyasha, who had caught this part of the conversation, let his ears drop against his head and diverted his eyes away from the group. Naruto gave a yawn. Right, well, I suggest we get him out of there so we can start heading back wherever it is you're going. My name is Naruto, by the way, he said with upside-down Yuza's eyes. Kagome, she said with a bright smile. Miroku, the monk, said with a formal respect and even a little fear, though he hid it well. Sango, she introduced herself with a tone of respect one has for another's abilities. Shippo bounded up to the ninja and waved at him. Hi, I'm Shippo. Naruto smiled and bent down to ruffle the fox kit's hair. It's nice to meet you, Shippo. Kirara in her small two-tailed form walked up next to the kitsune and gave a soft mew. Oh, and who might this be? Kirara. Sango replied as she bent down and the small cat crawled up her arm and perched itself on her shoulder. Glad we're all introduced. Now can you get me the hell out of here? Inuyasha yelled. Ah, of course, Naruto said absently before making a few hand seals. Kai. Inuyasha rose in a cocoon of earth that crumbled to dust as it raised itself above the surface. Inuyasha dusted himself off and turned, only to find Naruto's blue eyes right in front of him. What the hell do you want? He snapped. The blonde had humiliated him and his ego was still very bruised. We're gonna go back to Kid's village, right, Inuyasha? Kagome asked the Hanyu. Yeah. He grunted back before kneeling so she could get up on his back. Kagome did so with Shippo climbing on Inuyasha's shoulder and Miroku and Sango climbing up on Kirara. You'd better keep up, Inuyasha said in warning before taking to the trees. Sango turned to ask if he wanted to mount Kirara, but with a smile and a shake of his head he sent them off. He sighed tiredly. Midorico, just what have you gotten me into? He muttered before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Chapter 5, Welcome to Naruto's Boot Camp. The group of, now 7, travelers slowly descended the hill that led to Kid's village. Inuyasha was in front, as usual, with Kagome rolling her bike down the road a little ways behind him with Shippo and the yellow backpack perched comfortably in the front basket. Miroku and Sango were slightly behind her having a private conversation. Or not so private. Naruto was a little ways behind them and was silently listening in, even though it did not appear to be so. Honestly, Miroku, I don't see what you're so worried about, was Sango's voice in a slightly hushed tone. I just find it strange, don't you? Of course I find it strange, but that doesn't explain why you're so worried. I've never heard of, much less seen any ninja move and fight the way he has. He seemed even faster than Koga when he twisted himself to escape the hold you had on him. Not only that, but at the end he formed those copies of himself. And they were solid, not just a simple illusion. We've all encountered ninjas and even demons that specialize in illusions, and I have never seen anything like it. That is true, but I don't think he's here to harm us. Miroku nodded his head rather discreetly. I agree with you, Sango. If he wanted to harm us, he would have already done it. And I don't think he is after the jewel shards either. If he was, then he could have easily taken them as well. Still, the copies, his speed, and the trick where he buried Inuyasha, I'm not sure he's entirely human. But, wouldn't we have sensed any kind of demonic aura or any difference it may have had from humans? Especially since he's so close. Miroku nodded again. The only thing that I find different of his aura is that it seems much more potent than any other humans. He paused and turned to the demon slayer. I'm not saying anything yet, but I think we should keep an eye on him. Sango nodded and the walk continued on in silence. Naruto let out a soft sigh. Inuyasha, whose sharp hearing had picked up the entire conversation, also picked up Naruto's sigh. He sent the young Umbu a discreet glance over his shoulder. Could he have heard them? The Hanyu asked himself. I wouldn't put anything beyond that guy, but he has to have some pretty sharp hearing in order to listen to them when he's so far away. He mentally shrugged before crossing his arms and continuing. Naruto stopped walking when a sight that nearly made him break down crossed his sight. A cherry blossom. The stray leaf slowly floated through the air like a ship searching for the lighthouse. It seemed to hover for a brief moment before, finally, as if by magic, began floating towards him. He slowly extended his hand and the blossom fell into it. He stared at it for a good long while, becoming lost in the memories of his past. It was painful, remembering any of them. But it was especially painful remembering her. She wasn't just his teammate, but his friend as well. She had helped him, and he had helped her. Memories, both good and bad, floated up to the surface. But the one that struck out the most was also the most painful. Live, her voice whispered to him even now. A single tear slowly escaped out of his eye, trailing down his cheek and wetting his face mask. I will, he thought softly before a soft wind blew the petal out of his hand. Mew was the only warning Naruto got before he felt Kirara licking the spot where his tear had fallen. He was jerked out of his memories from the sensation and slowly looked to the two-tailed fire cat that was perched comfortably on his shoulder. How she had gotten there he had no idea. He smiled at the cat demon and lightly petted her head. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Kirara let off another soft mew and purred as Naruto scratched under her chin. Oh, so you like that, do you? Naruto chuckled. Hey ninja, what the hell are you doing back there? Came Inuyasha's yell from a little ways down the road. Naruto waved him off. Nothing, Inuyasha. His face became clouded with sadness once more. Nothing at all. And so he walked off, leaving the falling sakura petals behind him. Kirara watched the blonde ninja's expressions change and felt a little worried. She had spent the better part of 2 days contemplating the blonde young man, trying to determine if he was a threat or not. When they were fighting, she detected no evil intent in his scent, only the occasional adrenaline rush, but that was about it. But it was then after the fight that his scent began to change and eventually indicate that he was sad. It was a subtle thing, so subtle in fact that the little Nico doubted that Inuyasha could pick up on it without a few more centuries' experience. Perhaps Sesomaru, but not Inuyasha. Still, she was confused. Why did this enigma that her master had called a ninja simply speak about his problems? She had often seen Sango speak her worries and troubles to Kagome. So why won't he do the same? Sometimes the two-legged ones could make things so complicated. The little Nico gave a silent shrug before stretching and curling herself into a ball on his shoulder with both tails wrapped around his neck. Naruto laughed softly as Kirara's fur tickled him, and the little Nico gave what appeared to be a smile at her achievement. For now the sadness was gone. Hey old lady, are you here? Came Inuyasha's voice as he pushed aside the cloth that covered the entrance. Ki looked up from her work with a relieved expression on her face. Inuyasha, ye are well. Inuyasha scoffed. Faye, of course we're alright, you old bat, was his rude reply. Inuyasha, sit, was Kagome's stern voice. In an instant the prayer beads glowed and Inuyasha plowed straight through the ground. Miroku sighed as he entered the hut, following Kagome. Honestly Inuyasha, you shouldn't be so rude. Inuyasha lifted his head and glared at the teenage girl. Stop that, you dumb bye. Sit Kagome yelled at the top of her lungs, sending Inuyasha straight through the wooden floor, probably breaking his back in the process. Ki moaned in despair. Oh, my floor. I had just finished cleaning them. Sorry, Kid, Kagome mumbled in an apologetic tone. Inuyasha groaned in pain. But everyone was more worried about the wood. Kagome, I think you killed him. Shippu put in as he stared down at the hole with the red-clad boy inside. No, Shippu, he's far too stubborn for that. Was Naruto's voice from directly behind the little fox kit, making him and everyone else, except for Inuyasha, jump 10 feet in the air. Would you stop doing that? Everyone, except Kid, yelled. What are you doing back here, assassin? Kid asked as she reached for her bow at the corner of the room. Ah, Kid Bazin, how nice to see you again, was Naruto's cheerful reply. Eve Ryan exchanged glances. You two, know each other? They each asked. Naruto suddenly appeared right next to Kid and wrapped an arm around her shoulder. Of course, Kid 3 and I go way back, don't we, Kid? The old woman was about to retort when she heard Naruto whisper in her ear. Say yes and I will explain everything later. The old woman paused in her decision. But style. He did appear to be traveling with the Inu group and he was willing to speak of his presence here if she told the group this. Also, there was something about the blonde that asked her to trust him, and something inside of herself was beckoning to do so as well. With a slow nod, Kid gave her consent. Kid, why didn't you tell us you knew a ninja? Kagome asked as she sat down next to the older woman. Kid was at a loss. As a priestess she hardly ever lied before, and so she did not know of how to come up with one at a moment's notice. Fortunately she didn't have to. Oh, I had asked her to keep knowledge of my existence a secret, Naruto said with his usual cheerful tone. How did you meet? Sango asked, with genuine interest. Naruto smiled. That is another story for another time. He stretched and gave Kid a pat on the back. Well, I'm gonna go for a walk. I'll see you all later. He spoke cheerfully before walking out the door. Kid looked to her bow and noticed a small note attached to it. While the others in the room went about their things and conversations, she discreetly took the note and read, Wait 20 minutes and meet me in the wet fields. Kid folded the note, and when Noon was looking through it into the fire, she waited a few minutes before finally standing and grabbed a bucket. I believe I need more water for the stew. I shall return shortly. And with that the old priestess left her small hut. Kid slowly made her way through the village. When the wet fields finally came into view, she saw Naruto, crouching before a group of children. She stopped and watched. Naruto sat in front of a group of no more than 10 children. He chuckled at their faces. He would never be able to do this in Konoha. Everyone knew what a ninja was, but here, a small earth dragon slowly rose from the earth. All of the children watched in fascination as Naruto blew a small stream of flame that formed into a fire dragon, followed closely by a water dragon. The children watched with gaping mouths at the sight of the 3 dragons swirling around each other. Naruto added to the effect by using his wind chakra to pick up leaves and make swirling motions around the beasts. Once upon a time there were 3 powerful dragons that ruled the universe. One of fire and ash, powerful and brash. One of water and ice, wise and fast. And one of earth and stone, ancient and kind. Each one was just as strong as the other and all equally ambitious. They fought and fought and fought forever in an eternal conflict. Until one day, Kami, wanting to put an end to their quarreling, took the dragons into his hand and slowly sealed them away, creating the world as we know it. The dragon of water became the seas and rivers. Gentle and flowing, just as the dragon they come from. The one of earth became the very soil we stand on. Powerful and kind to those who nurture it. And the fire dragon became the great Sunday, proud and stubborn. Slowly the images faded away and crumbled to nothingness. The children all gawked at him before bursting out into cheers and squeals of excitement. Each one ran up to him and bombarded him with hundreds of questions a second. Naruto chuckled softly. Even though it was chaotic, he enjoyed it. The parents of children would always shy them away when he approached. Now, however, he was able to enjoy the presence of children without the people's fear or hate. He stood from his crouched position. He chided. A magician never reveals his secrets. Pow, off you go. Your parents are probably waiting for you. The children all gave a small in disappointment, but shuffled away nonetheless. Naruto chuckled once more as he watched them walk away. I assume you're ready? He asked over his shoulder to Kid's hunched form. Who are you and why are you here? Who sent you? Naruto smirked. Well, My name is Uzumaki Naruto and I'm here to help you all get the jewel shards away from Nariku. And as for who sent me? I don't think I can tell you that just yet. He replied shrugging. Kid narrowed her eyes at him. You said you would explain everything. I did, didn't I? Naruto said with a thoughtful He sighed and turned back to her. With a casual yet serious eye he spoke. Know that I was sent here to specifically help Kagome and Kikyo. Though as of now it appears the second is rumored to be dead. But if she is still alive then I must help them both. Why? Naruto remained silent, choosing his next words. Let's just say it benefits the one I am serving. But who? Kid paused as realization dawned on the elder Miko. The only person it could possibly benefit from helping Kagome or Kikyo would be the Shuriken, Lady Midorico. She exclaimed and swayed on her feet as she suddenly felt dizzy. Naruto appeared next to her and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Easy now. You're pretty sharp for an old woman, Kid. I didn't expect you to figure it out so soon. Kid looked at the ninja with a new respect in her eyes. To truly be beckoned by the Lady Midorico herself one had to be great. But where did you come from? How did you get here? Naruto flinched as if he was struck. That is another story for another time, he said. His voice was hollow and haunted and Kid had to hold back a shiver that threatened to go down her spine at the sound of it. Naruto regained his composure and looked at her. Don't tell any of the group about this. If they know it might make my mission much more difficult. Kid slowly nodded. I understand. Naruto nodded back and began making his way into the village, all the while repressing the memories of a past he longed to banish. As Naruto approached the hut, Inuyasha was suddenly heard for 3 whole miles. You can't go back now. We have shards to find. As expected, Kagome's voice followed shortly after. I have tests in Inuyasha and I have friends and a whole other life that I have to get to. If I don't pass these exams I'll never get into college, and if I don't get into college I'll never find a job, and if I don't find a job I won't make a living and I won't make any money, and if I don't make any money then no more ramen. Ever. Inuyasha grunted, he almost caved but he held firm. I'm not letting you go and that's final. Sit. And Kid got a second hole in her floor. Naruto parted the curtain and whistled in appreciation. Yup, big sit. He then looked at Kagome's fuming form and smiled. Don't worry, Kagome. You can go. Everyone in the group looked at the latest addition to their group in silent wonder that he would dare step in between Kagome and Inuyasha's usual arguments. Kagome sent him a grateful glance and Inuyasha stood up from his hole. Who the hell said you had any say in the situation? Naruto spared him a lazy glance. Because while Kagome is doing her exam, you and I will be training. Or more specifically refining that style that you like to call swordsmanship. Inuyasha growled. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Naruto ignored him and turned to Sango. You Sango will be learning how to throw these. He took out a kunai and a shuriken and a few exploding tags. Then to Miroku. And you Miroku will be learning how to make these. He took out numerous seal designs and scrolls with different forms of written seals. He then turned to Shippu. Too many things to name. Hey! Naruto then smirked sadistically. Oh, and don't worry, Kagome, I got something special in mind for when you come back. His tone was dark and foreboding. Kagome shivered and suddenly felt like taking a 2 or 3 month vacation. Naruto's sadistic glee could be seen even behind the face mask. Welcome to Naruto's boot camp. His dark laughter echoed through the hut. Chapter 6, Training is Hell. Looks like I'm back. Also, for those of you who were wondering, I made that story with the dragons up myself. And some people seem to have misunderstood the crossover thing. Those aren't for votes, I just listed the number of crossovers I have in my head that are planned out or partially planned out. I'm gonna make them all eventually. Or at least I'm planning to. Anyway, let's get on with the story. Sango groaned in pain from her place on the floor of Kid's hut. Miroku sat beside her, his hand, for once, was utterly still. They were both filthy and looked like they had gone through World War III without sleeping, eating, and with only 2 rounds of ammo and a bayonet. Kid looked at the two with wide-eyed astonishment. She thought they had remained in the village all day. What kind of demon did they fight and how far was it? She was about to open her mouth to ask when the cloth parted, revealing Shippu, who took 2 steps into the hut before falling face first into the ground with an audible thud. He didn't move, but he was still breathing. Kid stared at the, now 3, occupants owlishly. Finally, after a full minute of silence, she opened her mouth to speak when Sango spoke. Kid, did Kagome-chan leave either her aspirin or the ones that put people to sleep? She asked with a faint groan. Kid blinked before looking around. No, she did not. Sango gave what sounded like a cross between a moan of despair and a sob of misery. Kid finally managed to speak. What happened to ye? Shippu painfully lifted a single finger and spoke, his voice muffled by the wooden floor. Naruto's boot camp. Kid blinked stupidly. Tell me. What exactly is Naruto's boot camp? The realm of pain and suffering. The 10th level of hell. You don't want to know, was the general response of the group. Kid blinked stupidly again. Sango decided to elaborate. He had us train. That was it? They had trained and were complaining like a bunch of babies. She was about to open her mouth to speak when Miroku spoke. That, he gritted out, was not training. That was a sadistic form of torture that he called training. Shippu groaned. Kid blinked. Just what did he have you do? Sango groaned. Well, with me it was. Flashback. Ah, Sango. So glad you could join me. Naruto said, smiling his signature smile at her as he stood from his perch on a stone. Sango looked around the clearing. So what form of training will we be doing now? Sango smiled. So glad you asked. He made a simple seal. Kai. Sango watched in fascination as the air in the clearing shimmered before a set of targets, 4 on the ground and 7 up on the trees, and an obstacle course, which was riddled with traps she couldn't see, stood about 20 yards distance from them. Naruto smiled as he presented her with about 20 kunai and 40 shuriken. Well now. The first step in your training is quite simple. I want you to learn how to throw shuriken. He presented the star. Throw them until you hit the ground-based bullseye 5 times in a row. Then learn how to throw the kunai. He showed her the special dagger. The same as the kunai. You're gonna keep throwing until you can hit the bullseye 5 times in a row. Sango stared at the foreign weapons before turning back to Naruto. Why do I have to learn how to throw these? I have Hireikatsu. Naruto blinked lazily. While it is true that Hireikatsu is a powerful weapon, it's much too cumbersome for precise strikes. For example, let's say that one of Naruto's insects is spying on you. You discover it, now it's trying to escape. Inuyasha is the only one that has the speed to chase it down, and your Hireikatsu is easily dodged by the insect because of its large size and the time it takes to reach its target. So because of that, it manages to reach high enough to escape Inuyasha and report back to Naruto. All of that headache can be easily avoided with a simple kunai or shuriken toss. They not only move through the air faster but are difficult to see, making them hard to dodge. Not only that, if you're in a major fight and you throw your Hireikatsu, your sword can take a second or 2 in order to draw it should a demon come in close. Time that you do not have. The kunai and shuriken are quick draw weapons that you can throw 5, 6, 8 in a single toss, dispatching your enemies quickly and cleanly. Any other questions? Sango shook her head and realized that perhaps these weapons did indeed have their advantages. So she grabbed one and prepared to throw. Stop! Naruto said as he walked forward. He gently gave her feet a slight nudge to settle them in the right position. Along with her arms. Now go. He stepped back and she started. Flashback end. I got that down pretty quickly, and then after that I had to run while throwing the weapons. It was difficult, but with the experience I had gotten with Hireikatsu I managed to finish it a few hours before dusk. She explained. That do not sound so strenuous. Kid spoke. Sango let out a bitter chuckle. Oh, but this is where it gets good. Flashback. Naruto smiled at his weapon-throwing protege. Good. Now listen up. This obstacle course is riddled with traps. Every trap is designed to be seen and removed from a distance. Therefore, with the proper use of kunai and shuriken, one can quite easily escape unharmed. I'll let you keep Hireikatsu as a shield, but don't throw it. Only kunai and shuriken. Got it? Sango nodded and with a brave face began walking in. Naruto watched her go with a lazy eye. Maybe I should have warned her to look underneath the underneath. He shrugged. Oh well. She'll live, I think. He vanished in a swirl of leaves. Flashback end. So what did the obstacle course have in it? Kid asked. But Sango did not answer. Instead, she shuddered and began mumbling to herself. Kid looked to Miroku next. The monk sighed. Flashback. Naruto stood in front of the perverted priest. I assume you know how to write? Miroku nodded, making Naruto smile. Good, that's less for me to teach. The young Umbu then took out various kanji of seals, some simple, some complicated. You're going to write these over and over again until you can do 5 in less than 10 seconds. Understood? Miroku looked at the odd kanji with an inquisitive eye. What is the purpose of this? Are they incantations of some sort? Naruto nodded. You can say that. Where I came from, people use seals such as these to do anything from healing wounds, sealing away a consciousness of a person, sealing away someone's strength, erecting barriers, affecting the land on a large scale. Of course, the more powerful the seal, the more complicated it is. Some incantations possess hundreds upon thousands of written seals. A summoning has at least 500 of these seals written in a scroll, and then the person using it must make at least 16 seals more in order to finish. Who knows? With enough seals, one might even be able to seal away that void in your hand. Miroku looked at the blonde Umbu with a flicker of hope appearing in his eyes. What exactly is a summoning? He asked, trying to hide the sliver of hope that had grown in him. Naruto smiled. I might show you some time. But not just yet. Now get started. You're gonna become this group's seal specialist. Miroku sighed and sat down. Taking out a brush and some ink, he began. 7 hours, 32 minutes, 42 seconds later. Miroku's hand throbbed with pain as he traced the black ink over the scroll again. He groaned softly. Can we stop now? Naruto looked up from the scroll he was reading to the setting sun and nodded. All right. He stood and walked over to Miroku, who was already standing up. Now then. Before we leave, let's see how fast you can write. He tossed Miroku a blank scroll which the monk caught easily. Naruto grinned. While dodging knives, Miroku barely had enough time to let out a small what before Naruto began attacking. Needless to say, the scroll was still blank. Flashback end. Ki then looked to Shippu. The little kitsune managed to drag himself closer to the fire before he began. Flashback. Little Shippu was standing in front of Naruto's masked form with wide innocent eyes. They were standing at the top of the steps that led to the shrine with 2 empty buckets next to them. At the bottom of the steps, around 50, there were 2 buckets loaded to the brim with water. Naruto smiled at the little kitsune. Shippu, can you tell me what your greatest assets would be? The little kitsune looked rather bashful as he scratched the back of his head with a small blush on his cheeks. Well, I have my illusions. Naruto smiled. True. But that's not the only thing you have. He smiled as he knelt so he could be at eye level with the little kitsune. One good thing you have, Shippu, is, you're small. Shippu's face faltered and then grew angry. If I don't have anything other than my illusion skills to help everyone, then just say so. Don't lie to me. Naruto smiled and waved his hands in a wavering gesture. Now Shippu. There's no need to get angry. Being small can actually be a good thing in a fight, especially for a kitsune. Shippu still looked peeved, but the small sparkle of interest in his eyes showed Naruto that the little kitsune was listening, so he continued. As of right now, your height is a disadvantage, but in order to capitalize on that you must first train your speed and agility, something that kitsunes thrive in. Think about it, Shippu, what's easier to hit, a fast-moving small target or a large slow one? A large slow one. Shippu said, now with a little excitement in his eyes. Naruto nodded. Exactly. But you're not fast enough yet. So you and I will be training to up your speed, and later I'll teach you how to combine your speed with power to make you a formidable opponent. But I have to warn you, it will be difficult and sometimes, even painful. Do you want to do this? Shippu looked hesitant for a brief moment before his eyes filled with determination. That was all Naruto needed. He smiled. Good. Our training will be going in stages. First we'll up your stamina and endurance so that you don't get too tired too quickly. Afterwards we'll be doing actual speed training, and then agility with coordination. After that I'll teach you how to use your speed in order to confuse and disorient you opponents. Okay. Shippu nodded enthusiastically. Naruto smiled. But he had to ask himself if the little kid would be so enthusiastic by the end of the day. Good. He exclaimed as he stood. He took 2 teacups and handed them to Shippu. I want you to take these 2 cups and run down the stairs, fill them up with the water in the buckets at the bottom, then run up and pour the water into these empty buckets here next to me. Don't stop until these buckets are full. Alright? Shippo nodded and began marching down the stairs. What he didn't know was that the buckets had a special jutsu placed on them that would absorb the water, making it rise very slowly, practically quadrupling the amount of time it would take to fill them up, and the buckets at the bottom were being fed directly from the nearby rivers with the use of a modified earth jutsu. Sorry Shippo, but it's for your own good. Flashback end. I see. Well, he presents valid points and I believe this training suits you all. But where is Inuyasha? The old lady asked. Almost as if waiting for his summoning, Inuyasha staggered through the door with an untransformed Tetsusaiga dragging behind him. He looked worse than all the others put together. With a muffled groan, the Hanyu leaned against the wall and slowly slid down. So what happened to ye, sadistic bastard? The Hanyu muttered. Flashback. Naruto stood in front of Inuyasha, who had his arms crossed with a scowl adorning his features. He looked around before choosing 2 decent-looking sticks and tossed one at Inuyasha, who caught it easily. What the hell are we doing here? Naruto took his stick in one hand and gave it a few test swings. This'll do nicely, he muttered to himself before turning to Inuyasha. Like I said yesterday, we'll be refining, or should I say, creating that disaster you call swordsmanship. Inuyasha growled in anger. I'll show you disaster. He snarled as he took the stick and settled himself as he got ready to fight. Naruto looked at his stance and identified all of the flaws. Quite a few. He absently noted. Don't bend your knees so much, keep your back straighter and grip the weapon with both hands. He pointed out the simpler ones. Inuyasha ignored him and scoffed. Shut up and fight. He yelled before charging in his usual way, head first with no plan whatsoever. Naruto sighed. He had known quite a few people like Inuyasha. Namely, Hyuga Niji and Sabaka no Gaara. He had to beat them all before they finally listened to him. It appeared as though Inuyasha would be no different. As the young Hanyu charged in with a wide swing, that to any normal human would have been lightning quick, but to Naruto was completely predictable. The young blonde flicked a small pebble in his finger that hit Inuyasha square in the eye, causing him to stumble back, clutching his eye and cursing like there was no tomorrow. Before Inuyasha could start his attack again, he felt all the air in his lungs leave in a whoosh. He doubled over in pain, and before he could register anything he saw Naruto's knee rise up and hit him squarely in the face. Then finally, to finish it off, the blonde swung his stick with amazing speed and hit him right in his Adam's apple. Inuyasha bent forward, coughing and hacking, wheezing as he tried to get air back in his lungs. Naruto sighed. Inuyasha. Unless you train and get better, eventually you're gonna get killed, or worse, everyone you care about will die. Inuyasha growled as best he could as he heaved himself off the ground. I always win. I always find a way to win. Except against a young human boy barely reaching his 20s just now. Naruto declared simply. Inuyasha growled again. You're not human. I don't know what you are, but you're not human. Naruto shook his head somberly. Alright Inuyasha. Let's review your fights. I heard from Kid that you have a brother who you always fight against. Let's see how you beat him in all of your fights. Inuyasha snorted but nonetheless began his tales of how he won each of his battles with Sesomaru. Naruto barely listened, he knew the outcome of each fight already. He just had to point it out to Inuyasha. I see. So your first fight you managed to cut off his arm by catching him off guard when you transformed Tetsusaiga by sheer dumb luck. Hey, Inuyasha began but was cut off by Naruto, who didn't want to give the half-demon the chance to start on his high and mighty tirade. And then when he had a human arm and was able to wield Tetsusaiga, you managed to get it back but were basically knocked unconscious, and if it wasn't for Tetsusaiga protecting you, he would have ended your life right then. Faye. And then when he was searching for Totosai to make him a sword, the old blacksmith had to make a river of fire to save your ass. And then finally when he had the dragon's arm and was ready to completely crush you, you managed to discover the scar of the wind, thus saving yourself once again through sheer dumb luck. Alright, I get it. Naruto narrowed his eyes. No Inuyasha, I don't think you do. Naruto's tone was angry, something Inuyasha never had heard in the short time that he had known the ninja, and quite frankly never wanted to hear again. The blonde walked right up to Inuyasha and leaned in very close to his face. You have been winning your fights through luck and by the grace of gods. If it wasn't for your friends being there, you might have never made it out of there alive. The blonde sighed and his tone took on a sad note. Take care of them, Inuyasha. If they die, you might just find out life isn't worth living. He suddenly looked much, much older. A look that did not belong on the face of a 17-year-old. Inuyasha was taken aback by the sound of the young ninja's voice. It was the sound of a man that had been completely and utterly defeated. Of someone that had nothing left to live for. What do you mean? He asked before he could stop himself. Naruto's eyes lost the sadness in them and turned back to their lazy dull blue. Nothing. He then sighed and rubbed his head. I won't force you, Inuyasha. Think about it for a while, and if you still want to train in order to protect your friends better, then you can find me by the river. With that said, the blonde vanished in a swirl of leaves. But the haunted look in his eyes was etched into the red-clad Hanyo's memory. XXXXXXXXX. Naruto turned at the sound of rustling leaves and found Inuyasha's form emerging from the trees. Before he could say anything, Inuyasha tossed him a familiar stick and settled himself in a fighting stance. A real one this time. Naruto smiled, and so he began his instruction. Flashback end. And where is Naruto-san now? He said he was gonna go take a walk and would see us early in the morning. Inuyasha mumbled. Kid nodded before she turned back to the stew cooking atop the fire. For Naruto's made a simple seal and vanished in a puff of smoke. Meanwhile, the real Naruto opened his eyes and sat up from his meditative position in the middle of a field. With a simple seal and a look of concentration on his face, he focused his chakra and 4 clones emerged. He put a hand to a tree in order to steady himself before looking at his 4 clones. You 4 should last the whole week. You know your assignments. The 4 clones nodded before leaping away. The real Naruto watched them go before walking towards the site of the Bone Eater's well. He stared down into the darkness with a lazy expression before taking a deep breath. Well, Midorico, I would like to see what the future is like. May I? The well gave a soft blue glow, and Naruto leapt into the darkness of the well and felt the warm blue light envelop him as the portals of time and space was distorted. He felt the warmth of Midoriko's magic on his skin, almost like she herself was standing next to him, offering her protection as well as her blessing. Thanks, Midorico. When he opened his eyes, he was met with the wooden roof of a house. It appears as though I've arrived. That's it for the first part of this series. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.